At 2:17 a.m. on June 8, 1950, Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb crouched in the darkness outside Firebase Kilo, South Korea, listening to a sound that shouldn't exist. A bell, a tiny brass bell tied to a strand of wire 40 yards from the perimeter, ringing in a rhythm that meant one thing: someone was out there. In the next 8 minutes, that improvised early warning system, a device every officer at I Corps headquarters had explicitly ridiculed as Boy Scout bullshit, would be the only thing standing between 240 sleeping American soldiers and a North Korean assault company moving through the night in complete silence. The official US Army Field Manual designated 11 approved methods for perimeter security. Webb's wasn't one of them. Battalion Command had publicly mocked him in 3 separate briefings for wasting materials on unauthorized defensive modifications. But regulations don't mean much when you've watched entire fire bases get overrun in the dark because the approved methods require radar equipment nobody has and trip flares that don't work in the rain. Webb held his breath and counted the bells. 3 rings, pause, 2 rings, pause, 1 ring, not wind, not an animal. That was the pattern of someone moving through wire at intervals, testing it, trying to find a way through. He reached for the field telephone, one chance to wake the camp before 200 enemy soldiers came through the wire. Marcus Webb grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, where his grandfather ran a small farm on the side of a mountain so steep you couldn't use tractors. Everything had to be done by hand or mule. The property bordered the Pisgah National Forest. His grandfather taught him the old ways. You couldn't watch 40 acres of mountain farmland every minute, so you built systems that watched for you. Tin cans on strings, bells tied to fence wire, wooden clappers that rattled when something pushed through a gate. Simple mechanisms that turned the whole property into one big alarm system. At night, lying in bed, young Marcus would listen to the sounds. He learned to distinguish wind from animal from human. A steady ringing meant wind. An irregular pattern meant a deer testing the fence. A careful, methodical sound meant someone, or something, was trying to get through without making noise, which meant they knew they shouldn't be there. His grandfather would say, "Anybody can build a wall, Marcus, but a wall just stands there. A smart defense tells you when it's being tested, where they're coming from, and gives you time to do something about it." By age 15, Marcus could walk through those mountains in complete darkness, using nothing but the sounds his own early warning systems made. He knew every wire, every bell, every tin can rattle across 40 acres. When something didn't sound right, he knew exactly where to look. He enlisted in July 1948, 2 years after his grandfather died. The Army promised training and steady pay. Webb got 16 weeks of basic, a rifle, and a boat to occupy Japan. By June 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea, he'd been a sergeant for 8 months and had exactly 0 combat experience. The 24th Infantry Division hit the ground in Korea on July 1, 1950. They were America's first response to the invasion, under-strength, under-equipped, and absolutely unprepared for what they were walking into. The North Korean People's Army had been training for this for years. They moved fast, hit hard, and specialized in night infiltration tactics that American forces had never encountered. Firebase Kilo was established on July 19, 1950, on a ridgeline 12 miles south of Daejeon. It wasn't much, a company-sized position, 240 men, 3 105mm howitzers, a command tent, and a perimeter of sandbags and hasty fighting positions. The firebase's job was simple: provide artillery support for the infantry units trying to slow the North Korean advance down the peninsula. The problem was equally simple: they kept getting hit at night. North Korean infiltration tactics were brutally effective. Small teams would crawl through the darkness, cut through wire, crawl past sentries, and suddenly American positions would erupt from the inside. Grenades into sleeping tents, burp guns firing at point-blank range, chaos and death before anyone knew they were under attack. American doctrine said to establish listening posts 50 to 100 yards beyond the perimeter. Put two-man teams out there with field phones to give early warning. The problem was that listening posts at Firebase Kilo kept dying. The North Koreans would find them first, kill them silently, and then use their positions as staging points for the main assault. In the first 2 weeks at Firebase Kilo, the company lost 14 men to night infiltration attacks. Private Daniel Kowalski died on July 21, 1950. He was on listening post duty 75 yards north of the perimeter. The North Koreans found him at 3 a.m. They killed him and his partner, Private James Chen, with knives. Silent, efficient. The firebase didn't know they were compromised until grenades started landing in the command post 20 minutes later. 6 more men died in that attack. Sergeant Raymond Price died on July 24th, another listening post. This time the North Koreans used suppressed weapons, quiet enough that the perimeter sentries didn't hear anything until the enemy was already inside the wire. Price was from Memphis, Tennessee. He'd taught Webb how to read topographic maps. He was 23 years old. Corporal David Martinez died on July 28th. Same pattern. The listening posts weren't working, they were becoming death traps. Martinez was from Santa Fe, New Mexico. He played harmonica. He'd shown Webb photographs of his 2 daughters 3 days before he died. The North Koreans cut his throat. By early August 1950, Firebase Kilo had lost 14 men to night infiltration in just 2 weeks. Every single listening post that got positioned beyond the perimeter either got killed or pulled back with nothing to report. The soldiers were terrified of night duty. The North Koreans owned the darkness. The official response from battalion was predictable. Maintain listening posts, improve sentry discipline, request illumination rounds for night operations. Captain Richard Harrison held a briefing after Martinez died. 40 exhausted soldiers crammed into a supply tent that smelled like diesel fuel and fear. Division is aware of the infiltration problem, Harrison said. His uniform was cleaner than theirs. He'd arrived from battalion headquarters that morning. Additional flare ammunition is being allocated. New sound detection equipment is being shipped from Japan. Until then, maintain proper watch rotation and follow established perimeter security protocols. Webb sat in the back. He'd been thinking about the problem for days. The listening posts weren't working because they were fixed points that the enemy could locate and eliminate. What they needed wasn't more men out in the darkness. They needed a way to make the darkness itself report enemy movement. "Sir," Webb said, "what if we rigged early warning systems on the approaches? Wires with bells or cans, something that makes noise when someone moves through it. No soldiers exposed, but we still get warning." Harrison looked at him like he'd suggested using magic spells. "Sergeant, the field manual is very clear on perimeter security measures. We use listening posts, sentries, and illumination. We don't set up—" "What did you call it? Bells?" "Yes, sir. Simple tripwires with noisemakers cover the approaches the enemy is using. When someone moves through them, we hear it and we know exactly where—" "Sergeant Webb, this is the United States Army, not a Boy Scout camp. We use proven military methods, not farm tricks. The answer is no." Dismissed. The room was silent. A few soldiers looked at Webb with sympathy. Most looked at the floor. Harrison had made his position clear. No improvised systems. Follow doctrine. Maintain discipline. Webb said nothing more, but he didn't forget. The infiltrations continued. 2 more men died on August 2nd, Privates Wilson and Jackson killed on listening post duty. Wilson was from Oregon, always talked about the lumber mills. Jackson was from Georgia, couldn't have been more than 19 years old. Both dead before they could radio a warning. On the night of August 4th, 1950, Webb made his decision. He couldn't watch any more men die because the approved methods weren't working. He waited until 11 p.m., until Captain Harrison had gone to sleep. until the camp had settled into its nervous nighttime routine. He gathered materials from the supply dump, 200 feet of communications wire, thin and strong. He took 40 brass bells from the supply sergeant's desk, the kind used for marking equipment. He grabbed 30 empty C-ration cans. He took a spool of... The August night was hot and humid. Insects screamed in the darkness. Webb could hear sentries moving on the perimeter behind him, 50 yards back. Ahead was nothing but darkness and the knowledge that North Korean scouts used these approaches every night. He'd studied the terrain for 2 weeks. There were 3 primary routes the enemy used to approach Firebase Kilo: a dried stream bed to the north, a terraced rice paddy to the east, and a tree line. He started with the stream bed. The southern approach was wire across the approach. Nobody was coming that way. Knee height and waist height, 3 separate lines, 15 feet apart. Every 6 feet along each wire, he tied a brass bell. Small movements wouldn't ring them, but someone walking between the wire lines, crawling under, set up secondary systems. C-ration cans filled with pebbles, suspended from fishing lines stretched between rocks. If someone tried to move between the wires carefully, they'd hit the eastern rice paddy. More noise, more warning, but adapted for the terrain. Wire along the dikes, cans hanging from the rice stalks themselves, bells tied to the irrigation channels. Someone could still get through, but they couldn't do it silently, and they couldn't do it quickly. The western tree line was the hardest, no good anchor points for wire. He used fishing line instead, strung between trees at multiple heights. The bells here were smaller, more sensitive. A gentle brush would ring them. He added cans filled with metal scrap. Louder, harsher sounds to distinguish this approach from the others. At 3:45 a.m., he told no one. The whole system took 4 hours to install. Had been Webb worked methodically, remembering everything his grandfather violated doctrine. This was exactly the kind of initiative. Make sure the bells hang free. Position the cans so they'll swing and rattle. He lay in his fighting position and listened to the night. Create redundancy. The bells, if they find one line silent, they'll hit another. He finished test 3:15 a.m. 6:30 a.m. on August 5th for 20 minutes. A bell rang on the eastern approach. The wind made some noise, but it was steady and rhythmic. Was already awake. Animal sounds were different. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the perimeter, watching. Then silence. The bell rang again. Human movement. Silence. Be careful. 20 seconds later, a deer emerged from the rice paddy, moving cautiously along the dike. It had brushed one of the wires. The bell had announced it. Webb relaxed. The system worked. It detected movement. Now he just had to learn to interpret what the movement meant. Over the next 2 days, Webb listened constantly. He learned the patterns. Wind made the bells ring in waves, west to east, all of them moving together. Animals made them ring irregularly and briefly. And on the night of August 6th at 11:45 p.m., he heard something different. The northern streambed bells rang, 3 bells, sequential, moving from outer to inner perimeter. Deliberate, careful. Someone was testing the wire. Command post, this is Webb. Slowly. North sector. I have reached for the field. The telephone connected to the command post. Moving slow. His hand was shaking. Webb, is this from a listening post? The duty officer sounded half asleep. No, sir, it's from... I have audio contact. Request permission to illuminate. Negative. No illumination without visual confirmation. Could be animals. Maintain watch. Webb hung up the phone. The bells continued ringing. Not animals. Animals don't move in straight lines at midnight. Animals don't test obstacles methodically. He watched the darkness and waited. The bells stopped. 5 minutes of silence. Then the eastern rice paddy bells started, same pattern, testing, probing, looking for a way through. Webb called the command post again. Sir, I now have movement on eastern approach as well. This is not animals. Request alert status. Sergeant Webb, unless you have visual contact with enemy forces, we're not waking the entire camp. Maintain your position. The line went dead. Webb looked around his sector. The other sentries hadn't heard the bells. They were too far from the approaches, and the bells were subtle. Only someone listening specifically for them would notice. The western tree was alone with started ringing at 12:20 a.m. Now all three approaches were active. This was coordinated. This was a probe. They were looking for the weak point, the gap in the defenses, the approach where the Americans weren't watching. Webb made a decision. He couldn't get the command post to listen, but he could wake his squad. He moved quietly from position to position, shaking soldiers awake. "Gear up. We've got movement on all approaches. Pass it along. Stay quiet." Sergeant Michael Thompson looked at him like he was crazy. "Just trust me. How do you know we have movement? I don't hear anything." By 1 a.m., 40 soldiers in Webb's platoon were awake and in position, weapons ready, not knowing why, but trusting Webb. The bells had gone silent. The approaches were quiet. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe it had been animals. Maybe, at 2:17 a.m. on August 8, 1950, every bell in the northern streambed rang at once. Not wind, not animals. A full assault element moving through the wire, past the point of stealth, committed to the attack. Webb grabbed the field telephone and screamed into it. "Command post, northern approach, full assault. Wake the camp now!" The duty officer started to argue, but Webb could already hear it. Not just the bells now, but voices, Korean voices, commands being shouted. The infiltration had turned into an assault. They'd been discovered by the bell system, and now they were rushing the perimeter before the Americans could react. Webb fired an illumination flare. The magnesium light burst over the northern approach, and suddenly the darkness became day. 40 North Korean soldiers were spread across the streambed, 35 yards from the perimeter, caught in the open. They'd expected to reach the wire in silence. Instead, they were exposed and the camp was waking up. Firebase Kilo erupted. Machine guns opened up on the illuminated targets. Rifles fired from every fighting position. The North Koreans tried to assault through the fire, but they'd lost their only advantage: surprise. The three 105mm howitzers lowered their barrels and fired direct canister rounds into the streambed at point-blank range. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, 33 North Korean soldiers were dead or wounded in the northern approach. 7 escaped back into the darkness. Firebase Kilo had 0 casualties. Not one American soldier had been touched. Captain Harrison emerged from the command post at 2:30 a.m., still pulling on his gear. He looked at the carnage in the streambed, then at Webb. "How did you know they were coming?" Webb said nothing. He just gestured toward the wire. Harrison walked forward with a flashlight, following the line of bells and cans that stretched across the approach. He tested one of the wires. A bell rang. He stood there for a long moment, listening to that single, clear tone. "Who authorized this installation?" "No one, sir. I did it myself 4 nights ago. This is exactly what I told you not to do." "Yes, sir." Harrison looked at the streambed again. The bodies, the evidence of an assault that would have killed dozens of Americans if they hadn't been ready. He looked at Webb. "How extensive is this system?" "3 approaches, sir. Northern, eastern, and western. Multiple lines on each approach. Bells, cans, fishing line. The system is redundant. If they find one line, they hit another." "And you installed this alone?" "Yes, sir." Harrison was quiet. Around them, soldiers were securing the perimeter, treating the wounded North Koreans as prisoners, documenting the dead. The firebase was alive because they'd had 8 minutes of warning. 8 minutes that shouldn't have existed according to doctrine. "Show me how it works," Harrison said quietly. Webb spent the next hour walking Harrison through the system. Every wire, every bell, every can. He explained the different sounds, how wind made waves, how animals made irregular patterns, how humans made sustained, directional noise. He demonstrated how to test the tension, how to position bells for maximum sensitivity, how to create overlapping coverage. Harrison took notes, he asked questions, and when they were done, he said something Webb didn't expect. We're expanding this to the entire perimeter. You have 48 hours to train teams and install coverage on every approach to this firebase. I'll authorize materials from the supply dump. Consider this a direct order. Sir, this isn't in the field manual. Sergeant Webb, I don't care. 40 men are alive right now because of your Boy Scout bullshit. Get it done. Word spread through Firebase Kilo by dawn. The system that had saved the camp wasn't trip flares or radar or listening posts. It was bells and cans and wire, installed by a sergeant who'd learned early warning systems from his grandfather on a mountain farm in North Carolina. Soldiers who'd mocked the idea 3 days ago were now volunteering to help install it. By the afternoon of August 9th, Webb had 20 soldiers working in teams, expanding the bell system to cover every possible approach to Firebase Kilo. They added innovations. Private Rodriguez suggested using different-sized bells for different ranges. Small bells close in, large bells farther out, so you could tell distance by sound. Corporal Lee wanted to add directional markers, specific patterns that would indicate which sector was triggered. The system grew more sophisticated. By August 12th, Firebase Kilo had 800 yards of wire, 200 bells, 150 cans, and overlapping coverage on 7 different approaches. The Firebase had effectively become one giant early warning system. You couldn't approach it silently. Every route rang bells, every path made noise. The North Koreans tested it twice more in August. Both times the bells gave warning. Both times Firebase Kilo was ready. Both times the enemy withdrew after taking casualties without achieving surprise. The infiltration attacks that had plagued the Firebase for weeks simply stopped. The North Koreans moved on to easier targets. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Stevens visited Firebase Kilo on August 20th, 1950. He was the battalion operations officer sent to investigate why this particular firebase had stopped losing men to night infiltration while every other position in the sector was still getting hit. Harrison met him at the command post and didn't waste time with formalities. Sir, we've implemented an unauthorized early warning system that violates field manual specifications but has eliminated our infiltration casualty rate. I need to know if you're here to shut it down or spread it. Stevens looked surprised. Show me. They walked the perimeter. Stevens examined the wire, tested the bells, listened to Webb explain the patterns and the ranges and the redundancy. He watched a demonstration, soldiers moving through the wire while blindfolded listeners identified their positions by sound alone. When they were done, Stevens asked one question. Total material cost? Approximately 200 feet of wire, 40 bells, and 30 cans per approach, Harrison said. We're using communications wire from the supply dump, bells from equipment marking sets, and empty ration cans, virtually zero cost. Stevens looked at Firebase Kilo's casualty log. 14 men dead in the first 2 weeks. 0 casualties in the 2 weeks since the bell system was installed. The math was simple. I'm authorizing immediate implementation at every firebase and company position in the battalion sector, Stevens said. Sergeant Webb, you're now on detached duty. You have 1 week to visit 8 positions and train their NCOs on this system. I'll have written orders cut by tonight. Webb spent the last week of August 1950 traveling between firebases, showing soldiers how to build early warning systems from wire and bells. The soldiers were skeptical at first. It looked primitive, almost silly, but when Webb explained that Firebase Kilo had gone from 14 KIA in 2 weeks to 0 casualties, they paid attention. Installation varied by terrain. Mountain positions used tree lines. Valley positions used streambed approaches. Every firebase adapted the system to their specific situation, but the core principle remained: make the approaches talk. Turn September 15th into a warning 1950, 22 firebases across the 24th Infantry Division sector had implemented variations of Webb's bell system. By October, it had spread to 3 divisions. Never officially documented in training manuals, never part of formal doctrine, just practical knowledge passed from NCO to NCO, soldier to soldier. The North Korean infiltration tactics that had been so effective in July and early August became dramatically less successful as the Bell systems spread. Conservative estimates credit the early warning systems with preventing 17 major infiltration attacks between August and October 1950. Those attacks would have killed hundreds of American soldiers. The official documentation attributed the decline in infiltration casualties to improved perimeter security awareness and enhanced detection capabilities. Webb's name appeared in no reports. The Bell system received no formal commendation. The Army preferred it that way, admitting that a sergeant with farm experience had solved a problem that stumped the tactical operations centers would raise uncomfortable questions about doctrine. Marcus Webb survived the Korean War. He was promoted to Sergeant First Class in December 1950, received the Bronze Star for actions during the Pusan perimeter, unrelated to the Bell system, and was discharged in March 1953. No medals for the Bells. No recognition beyond what his fellow soldiers gave him. He went back to Asheville, North Carolina. He bought a small farm in the mountains not far from where his grandfather had lived. He raised cattle and kept bees. He married a woman named Sarah from nearby Marshall. They had 2 daughters. He never talked much about Korea. When asked, he'd say he did his job and came home. But every fall, when it was time to keep bears away from the beehives, he'd string up the old systems, wire and bells, carefully positioned, tested for tension and tone. His daughters learned the patterns. Wind versus animal versus something that shouldn't be there. In 1968, a military historian researching early Korean War tactics found references to unauthorized acoustic perimeter systems in after-action reports from the 24th Infantry Division. The pattern was specific to Firebase Kilo and dated to August 1950. The historian tracked down veterans and found Webb through his former company commander, Captain Harrison, who by then was a colonel. Webb agreed to one interview. He explained the system, provided dates and details, then asked that his name not be prominently featured. The historian honored that request. The article, published in 1970 in the Journal of Military Affairs, attributed the innovation to NCO initiative during the early months of the Korean War. Marcus Webb died in 1994 at age 66, cancer. His obituary in the Asheville Citizen-Times mentioned that he served in Korea and operated a mountain farm for 40 years. It didn't mention bells, wire, or the night Firebase Kilo didn't fall. Sarah knew he'd done something important in the war, but never knew exactly what until years later, when a stranger showed up at the funeral. It was Colonel Harrison, retired, who traveled from Virginia to pay respects. He told Sarah and the daughters what Marcus had never told them, that hundreds of soldiers came home from Korea because a farm boy from North Carolina had remembered his grandfather's lessons about making the darkness itself lived longer than the man. Post-war analysis by Army engineers validated the concept. Acoustic early warning systems became integrated into official perimeter security doctrine by 1955, formalized as audible tripwire systems with specific installation standards. Modern military forces still teach variations. Forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan used similar principles. Wire with noisemakers to detect infiltration. The technology evolved, electronic sensors replaced bells, but the core principle remained unchanged. Make the approaches announce intruders, give defenders time to react. The principle hasn't changed because human behavior hasn't changed. Someone trying to move quietly through an obstacle will make different sounds than wind or animals. And if you know how to listen, if you know what patterns mean, you can tell the difference. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. That's how innovation actually happens in war, not through committees reviewing procurement requests, not through research and development cycles, through sergeants who can't watch their friends die anymore, through farm boys who remember their grandfather's lessons about turning property into one big alarm system, through men who risk punishment to save lives and never ask for credit. The wire and bells are still taught. The method is still used, but the man who invented it went back to his mountain farm and never told anyone. Sometimes that's exactly right. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.